What drives you, Exile? Is it justice? Revenge? Honor? No. It is power. Your limits will be tested. Break them. Do what is thought impossible, and the Atlas will follow.
Path of Exile, Echoes of the Atlas is a new endgame expansion focused around bossing and area control. And to be successful in this expansion, we're going to require builds that excel in these two areas. And in the Challenge League, we're going to be locked into a small arena forced to fight wave upon wave of nasty and difficult enemies. So chances are for this, we're going to require builds that aren't so much focused on clear speed and are more focused on being able to handle small areas of bosses or powerful enemies. My goal is to provide you all 5 powerful builds that will be able to handle both the expansion and the Challenge League with ease. These are going to include full path of buildings, which will be in the description, that include notes about leveling, information about the characters, multiple leveling trees, multiple gear sets, and they should have everything that you need to have a successful league start. The build we're going to be talking about today is Creeping Frost. This is an Occultist build, and although it might not have looked like it, the Occultist is actually getting a massive buff, at least for this build. What you may have not noticed is that Malediction is now available for only 2 Ascendancy points instead of having to go through Profane Bloom. Previously, you might remember on this build that we would grab Withering Presence just for the free Chaos Resistance, because Profane Bloom really didn't do very much for this build. A 25% chance to explode really didn't do very much when our clear was already excellent. However, Malediction is going to give us an additional curse as well as some increased effectiveness of curses on top of giving us the Malediction effect, which is 10% reduced damage taken and 10% increased damage taken on enemies. With this additional curse plus Malediction, we are looking at over a 50% more damage multiplier being added to this Ascendancy. This is going to be quite huge for our damage. Now as for Creeping Frost itself, this build excels in area control. You can very easily keep a large area under your control by chilling and freezing all of the enemies within it. Creeping Frost is a damage over time ability that you cast upon the ground and then it slowly creeps around looking for enemies to kill. If you have issues killing bosses sometimes because you simply can't dodge the abilities, the amount of chill and chill effect that this build obtains causes bosses to move almost in slow motion. Now this build doesn't have the greatest boss DPS, it can scale quite well up to a few million DPS with some gear. However, very early on it may take you a little bit longer to actually get the bosses down. However, it will be extremely safe while doing so. This build also has some of the easiest gearing out of any of the builds that you will see out of my guides. If you're a very new player, this is the build that I suggest for you because it requires no specialty gear, it doesn't require you to know anything really about the game or the build or anything like that to be able to excel quite well. And that is because it has a very simple playstyle. For the most part, this build is a single button click to do most of the content in the game. You can add in 1 or 2 additional button presses for things like Cold Snap as well as a curse, but beyond that, it doesn't require any other know-how. The build also can, as I said previously, scale quite well with gear. If you can start stacking some plus to level of gems, as well as some cold damage over time multiplier through your gear, you can start to get some excellent damage. The clear is already very good without any of this, however, it can help quite a bit for bossing. So now that I've given you a preview of what this build is about, let's jump into the game and take a little bit of a closer look. Hey guys, Big Ducks here, and welcome back to the channel. Now if you're enjoying my content, make sure that you like this video so that you can see more of it. Also, over 75% of you are still not subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you want to make sure that you see the latest up-to-date League Start content, make sure that you subscribe so that you can get all of these videos right in your feed. Now I do want to remind you that there is going to be a playlist up in the top right corner now that has all of my League Start content for 3.13. So if the preview of this build didn't do it for you, check out that playlist and you can maybe find something that's a little bit more suitable for what you're looking to do. Now without further ado, let's get back to the guide. Alright boys, so if you've made it this far, that means you're looking for a little bit more information about how to league start this build for 3.13. So the first thing that I want to talk about is actually leveling. Now while you're leveling, you're going to be using a couple different abilities. The first ability that you're going to get access to out of what I suggest that you use is Stormblast Mine. Now Stormblast Mine is a little bit different than some other abilities that you might have tried if you're very new to the game. What it is an actual mine that you place on the ground, and then you have to use this ability over here to detonate them. Now, if you place the mines close enough, they will detonate all in sequence and cause more damage. Each one of these mines is going to apply a 3% increased damage taken to enemies near it, and that goes all the way up to 150%. This ability is actually quite good for both clear and single target, and it will carry you all the way up to the point where you actually are able to transition to Creeping Frost. Now, what I suggest is that while leveling, you actually put detonate mines on your left click, so when you're running around and you're tossing these mines, they will auto detonate as you walk. Now, after you're done with Stormblast Mine, the next ability you'll get is Frost Bomb. This is at level 4. You can use it just to maybe help clear some packs, but I would just hold on to it for later because we're going to need it. And then at 12, around the time that you enter Merveil's Cavern, you're going to get access to Creeping Frost. This is our main ability. So Creeping Frost is a damage over time effect, and this damage over time effect is applied to the ground wherever you click with your cursor. Now, this effect will actually slowly creep around on the ground trying to find enemies, hence the Creeping Frost, and it does significant damage over time. Now, a lot of people probably ask the question, well, why not Vortex? Well, Creeping Frost allows you to target anywhere that you like, and it does within 5% of the damage of Vortex. It's really not that big of a difference. And when you add in the GMP gem, you'll see that it adds a ton of AoE to this gem. We get a huge amount of clear. Now, the interesting thing about this is that early on, the hits of the ability actually do matter. You can see we've got 5 projectiles there. Now, if you target it very close to yourself, you'll notice how all of the projectiles overlap, and they do this little explosion. So very early on, additional projectiles is actually useful because those explosions do overlap, and it will cause you to do some additional single target damage, which makes the recipe that we're going to be using in a little bit to help craft some weapons much more useful as well. So Creeping Frost will be our main ability for the rest of the game. Now, you can continue using Stormblast Mine like I said, but I do suggest that you swap over at 12. Now, we're also going to get Cold Snap. This is an ability you'll get at level 16. This is just an ability that you can use for some extra clear. It also does provide us frenzy charges whenever an enemy dies within the zone. There is also the Vol version of Cold Snap, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we're actually mapping. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and talk about this recipe. So the next thing I want to talk about is that if you're having issues with damage much earlier in the game, you can actually use a vendor recipe to supplement your damage quite a bit, especially on this build. Now for a spellcaster, there is a very specific recipe that you can use, and that is going to be a blue wand of any kind. I suggest that you get some links that can be pretty useful for you. Blue, blue, green is quite good. Blue, blue, blue also works quite well. So you're going to want a blue wand, and then you're going to want any of the resist rings. This can be a ruby ring, a topaz ring, or a sapphire ring. And then also an Orb of Alteration. So when you sell these 3 things together, you're going to get access to a wand with added damage to spells. And it is whatever type of resist you use, it's the same type of added damage. Now it does matter what rarity the ring is. So if you look at a white rarity ring here, we're going to get a tier 8 modifier here. Keep in mind, the higher the number of the tier, the weaker that it is. So this gives us a tier 8. If we use a blue ring, it's going to give us a tier 7, which is a little bit better. And then on top of that, if we use a yellow ring, it's going to give us a tier 6, which is significantly better. This is going to be an excellent boost to damage, especially while we're using Stormblast Mine. Now you can craft 2 of these. Keep in mind that the level requirement does change with each of those recipes. I think it goes 12, 14, 20. You can craft 2 of these, dual wield them, and that should carry you through the entirety of the campaign, just these wands. I suggest that you don't augment these wands because what you're going to want to do is that after you make these wands, you're going to want to come over here and you're going to do the next thing that I suggest that you do while leveling, and that is crafting resistances on your gear. Now, as you level up, you're going to get to Act 2, and in Act 2, you're going to save a woman called Helena. She's going to give you access to a hideout. I suggest that you create it immediately, just so that you can get access to this. As you go through the campaign, you're going to unlock these crafts through these little benches, and one of the first crafts that you get are resists. You'll see here that we have the 16 to 20 lightning resist, 16 to 20 cold resist, and 16 to 20 fire resist. You can craft this on almost any piece of gear, including those wands that have the added damage to spells. So what you want to make sure that you're doing is that as you're leveling up, you want to keep your resist at 75 at all times, fire, cold, and lightning. You can use this resist craft here to just easily max out your resistances on any piece of gear. You can craft it on absolutely every piece of gear that your character can equip, except for flasks. So make sure that you stay on top of those resistances and you'll have a much better time while leveling up. The next thing I want to talk about is a skill tree, and we're going to actually have to move over to Path of Building to do this, so let's head over there. So this is what your Path of Building will look similar to when you load up the guide that's in the description down below. And what you're going to look for is down here in the very bottom, you're going to see this little bar that allows you to check on different leveling trees. These passives are going to be the ones that you want to take first. You're going to move up through spell damage, grab this cold damage here and resist, life and mana, grab these area nodes that cut across to here. We're going to head over, grab some life, grab this key Keystone, which is Elemental Overload. This is a big damage boost, and you want to go for this first. And then we're going to head up here and grab some cold damage. And then also on each of these trees, you'll notice that there is an ascendancy point. When you do the lab and you gain your ascendancy points, it will show you on each one of these which one of these points that you should take first. And then as we move on, it's going to get more and more and more. There'll be more nodes that you can take. We'll be moving over to the right side of the tree, trying to grab more damage and defensives in life, and so on and so forth. So let's head back into the game now. So now that you're more familiar with some tricks that you can use to keep your character stronger while leveling up, as well as which passives you're supposed to put in on your skill tree, let's talk about actually gearing your character once you reach the end of the game. Now this character is specifically quite good with almost no gear whatsoever. All of the items on this character are easily accessible except for one, and it is not needed whatsoever. So this character uses mainly rare gear. It's just rare, life, and resists and energy shield are the main things that you're looking for. There's nothing too special about this gear. You're just trying to get as many resists as you can, as much life as you can, as much energy shield as you can. You'll see I do have some more powerful rings, like this one here has frostbite on hit as well as a bunch of resistances. You don't need these. You can do without a frostbite on hit ring. You can actually simply apply frostbite through your Arcanist brand, like I said before, and the rest of this is just random gear, some block on the shield, and then there is the one unique that this build does use. This is very cheap. It's typically like 1 chaos early on in the league. Honestly, you can find this yourself a lot of the time. And then the other unique is going to be Snake Pit. Honestly, this ring is not needed. I just use it to help a little bit with clear. When you put this in the left ring slot, it's going to allow your spells to fork, which causes you to get a little bit better clear out of Creeping Frost. You do not need this whatsoever. You can completely ignore this, not use it whatsoever, and you'll be perfectly fine. And then for the wand, you're just looking for cold damage, spell damage, cold damage over time multiplier, as well as plus the level of all cold spell gems. The other thing that you might see at the bottom there is trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. So this wand in and of itself has Frost Bomb, Cold Snap, and Storm Brand inside of it. Whenever we use a skill, you'll notice that those abilities kind of auto-proc. And you'll see here, we get our abilities to just proc whenever we're using a skill. Each of these abilities has an internal 4-second cooldown, but this helps us just cast some extra abilities while we're moving around. That is pretty much all you need to know about the gear. It's just some very simple rares, a couple easy to use uniques, and nothing special whatsoever. As for the chest piece, the 6-link, I know that it's very hard to get a 6-link. Just go for a corrupted 6-link chest piece with the correct colors. They're typically not as expensive as, say, buying like a very good 6-link, which can cost multiple exalts. Most of the time early in the league, a halfway decent 6-link corrupted chest piece is around like 25 to 30C. It'll probably be the most expensive piece of gear that you'll even have to buy. And that is pretty much all that you're going to need to know about the character to level it up and make it through maps. Now, something else that I want to do is I do want to run a map just so I can give you a little bit of an idea of how a typical map goes. So this is going to be a tier 16 sunken city. I just randomly hit it with an alchemy orb. It's got actually some pretty dangerous mods on here. It's got gain extra as cold and gain extra as lightning. We're just going to slap this into the map device. This is on standard and we are at Awakener level 8, and we're just going to run right in and take a look at how everything goes. Now this build, like I said before, is relatively simple to pilot. However, when you do get into the very deep endgame, you can get in a couple extra abilities that will help you. Now, the standard gameplay of this is you run around, you drop Creeping Frost, and everything kind of just slowly loses all of its life. There's not very much to it. You don't have to worry too much about like min-maxing anything. When you find more difficult enemies like this, you can use a couple extra abilities like Cold Snap as well as our Curse, and you can see that even an essenced mob there dies quite quickly with pretty much no issues. So beyond just the standard clear, there are a couple extra abilities that we can use for very difficult enemies, and that's going to be Vol Cold Snap as well as Vol Righteous Fire. And what Vol Cold Snap does is this ability causes you to gain kind of a Cold Snap effect around you, causes you to gain Frenzy charges constantly, and it also just does a little bit of extra damage. What Vol Righteous Fire does is it sacrifices a portion of your life and energy shield, and it causes you to do significantly more spell damage while you are actively having that ability up. So those two abilities are kind of like little cooldowns that we can pop to do some extra damage. They're typically reserved for a single target, but you can use them just if there's like a hard pack or a big group of mobs or something that you want to kill. You can typically build up charges again for them quite quickly. Beyond that, we do have Steel Skin on left click. It's just an extra little buffer of damage prevention that we've got that we can use. When you put an ability on left click, it auto casts it as you move around. And then we do have our Arcanist brand, which is currently casting Blade Blast, which gives our enemies Unnerve, meaning they take 10% 10% increased spell damage, and it's also giving us Frostbite, which is our curse. Beyond that, there isn't really much extra to this build. You can use Enduring Cry to be able to heal yourself back up or to gain endurance charges. Easy and simple clear. Because we chill so effectively, enemies have a very hard time hitting us. We don't really feel like we're in damage too often just because enemies are chilled and frozen so consistently. And because our abilities have so much effectiveness of chill, these enemies really don't move. And when we jump to the boss here in just a moment, you'll see what I mean by the bosses really can't do anything to us whatsoever. So now that we're here at the boss, the typical way that you're going to fight a boss is you're going to run in, pop all of your cooldowns as well as your curse, hit both of your damaging abilities, and then don't continue DPSing. It's very important because of this keystone that we get Elemental Equilibrium that you don't continuously attack the boss over and over and over again. It won't hurt you too much if you do. However, because we have this keystone, another little side note here is make sure that you don't have any added cold damage to spells on anything, because we are going to be using Stormbrand in our trigger wand to proc this Elemental Equilibrium and keep their cold resistances low. So what we'll do is we will run up to the boss here, we're going to wait for her to spawn, and we're going to pop all of our cooldowns and then start DPSing. So we're going to pop our cooldowns here, and then we're going to get both of our abilities on, and we're just going to kind of chill a little bit. But what you'll notice is how slow she's actually moving. Now this boss doesn't really move around very much, but she does have quite a few abilities that she can cast. So I'll show you here again when we have both on her, how her attacks are basically in slow motion right now. But you'll see here, when she is actually attacking, I mean, she is barely able to get her abilities off before she has to leave because her health has gotten so low. That's basically how bosses go on this character. You don't have to worry too much. It doesn't do an insane amount of boss damage. This isn't going to be like one-shotting Cirrus or anything like that. However, when you do get to the bosses, it is a relatively easy time fighting them because of how slowly that they move. So I do suggest that you give this build a try. It's one of my favorite builds. It's very new player friendly, and even if you're not a new player and you just want an easier time, say in the new like 10 boss arena, you just want to be able to move around without getting hit by all of the totally not visual clutter that is going to be in all of these fights. I'm sure that GGG has done tons about it to make sure that none of that's in there. This might be a good pick for you. It's very cheap. I've used it multiple times as my league started, and I've always been very impressed. So I hope that you guys give this one a try. And that is going to be the end of the guide. Now, if you have further questions about this or any of my other builds, make sure that you join my Discord. The link is in the description down below. There is a PoE questions section that has a ton of helpful people that would be happy to help you with all of your questions. Keep in mind during League Start, it may be quite busy, so if you do have answers to other questions, make sure that you help out other people as well. Also, if you want to catch me theory crafting some of these builds live, make sure to follow me over twitch.tv/bigducks. I'm going to be live every day all the way up till the release of the 3.13 League, and then we will be pushing pretty hard right upon League Start, so make sure that you come and hang out with your boy. So that's going to be it, guys. Thank you for watching the video. I hope that you have a wonderful League Start, and remember, if you enjoy my content, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in Ray Class. And I'll see you guys in 3.13 Echoes of the Atlas.